and the far south. In theory, virtually every Croatian could have had a motive for revenge. The prosecution argues that it does not dispute Croatia's right to retake its lands. It just disputes Croatia's right to use Croatians to do it. On the issue of necessary and reasonable measures, we have said all along that General Gotovina took necessary and reasonable measures to prevent and punish crime. Look at the evidence, Your Honors. General Gotovina was there when Minister Šušak passed on the U.S. conditions on the 2nd of August to the entire military leadership. Again, a private conversation, a state secret conversation, which included that military district commanders were to pass on orders to prevent, quote, any kind of uncontrolled conduct, torching, looting, etc., close quote. That's Exhibit D-409. As Laušić testified, Šušak also ordered that measures be taken to prevent any behavior that would require soldiers to be brought before a court. That's transcript 15166, lines 14 to 22. Yet OTP says at paragraph 16 of its brief that Šušak's order, which was given in private to the top officials of the military, was essentially a pretend order, quote, aimed at avoiding liability for the crimes rather than genuinely preventing them, close quote. The prosecution, of course, fails to identify who Šušak was allegedly pretending to. Nor is there any evidence in the record in the form of witness testimony, presidential transcript, and the like to support OTP's inference that Minister Šušak's order was not intended to be followed. Again, Your Honors, the Gotovina defense says that when Minister Šušak ordered that, quote, any kind of uncontrolled conduct, including torching and looting, were to be prevented, that's what he meant. The prosecution says when Šušak privately told the military leadership to prevent looting and torching, he meant allow looting and torching. General Gotovina issued explicit orders prior to storm that all criminal activity was to be eliminated. Consistent with the U.S. conditions and Šušak's instructions, General Gotovina issued the order at Exhibit D-201, page 2. Here's what he ordered, quote, familiarizing units with the need to eliminate all negative occurrences that will surface in the course of combat operations, with a focus on preventing torching and destruction of larger populated areas and towns. Now, even though General Gotovina ordered the elimination of all negative occurrences, the prosecution argues that this order meant that units should protect populated areas, but that General Gotovina wanted them to burn down rural areas. We could see paragraphs 156 and 157 of the prosecution's final brief. The second sentence there. The political activities plan attachment indicates that Gotovina and Split MD Command expected burning and destruction to occur and accepted the anticipated destruction of rural areas. Consistent with those instructions and with the JCE members' focus on quickly colonizing the larger towns in the Krajina with Croats, Croatian forces left the larger towns relatively intact, but devastated rural areas in Sector South. Herein lies another fundamental contradiction in the prosecution's case. The prosecution doesn't argue that General Gotovina was issuing weak, repetitive, ineffective orders. They do that later when they try to discredit General Gotovina. They're arguing here that General Gotovina issued an effective order. That General Gotovina issued an order to protect the larger towns, and that order was implemented. But that General Gotovina deliberately failed to mention rural areas, thereby signaling to his subordinates that he wanted them burned down. Again, the prosecution is alleging that General Gotovina issued effective orders prior to storm. I ask you, Your Honors, is this interpretation by the prosecution the only reasonable interpretation of this order? This is nonsense. We say that when General Gotovina ordered the elimination of all negative occurrences, he meant eliminate all negative occurrences. The prosecution argues that it means, I order you to burn down rural areas. Once again, they never put this interpretation of this order to anyone, nor is there any evidence in the record to support their interpretation. Not even Tunins suggested. But in their blind zeal to obtain a conviction, the prosecution would rather argue the ridiculous than concede an obvious point. Further on in D-201, at page 2, General Gotovina orders advising members of units on conduct with civilians and POWs in accordance with the Geneva Conventions. Now, what the prosecution claims is a boilerplate order, in fact, was put into practice. In paragraph 125, the prosecution calls it a generic reference to the Geneva Convention that was, quote, manifestly inadequate. Apparently, General Gotovina, according to the prosecution, should have itemized what Croatian forces shouldn't do. Don't kill, don't burn, don't loot, don't torture. They never put this claim to any witness. But you heard that this order was implemented. You heard that booklets were handed out on the Geneva Conventions to troops prior to storm. Those booklets are in evidence as D-533 and D-1602. And as witness Sudats testified at transcript 21367, lines 21 to 24, the commanders did in fact itemize for their subordinates what General Gotovina wanted. Quote, I remember what our superior officers were telling us. It was a war, and we remembered the most important things. Don't kill, don't loot, don't rape, help all those who are wounded. Such basic things. Evidently, Your Honors, General Gotovina's subordinate commanders were able to figure out just fine what General Gotovina wanted when he ordered that units must treat civilians and POWs in accordance with the Geneva Conventions. You saw that subordinate commanders, such as the commander of the 4th Guards Brigade, passed down these orders to their subordinates. That's P-1202, page 12. During Operation Storm, General Gotovina continued to place an emphasis on preventing crime. On the evening of 4 August, the political affairs officer at the evening briefing reminded all commanders that Knin must not suffer the same fate as Grahovo. On the morning of 5 August, General Gotovina personally ordered, quote, maximum fairness towards civilians and the UN, close quote, in all operative groups and to all commanders, as his forces were about to enter populated areas such as Knin. On 6 August, you have seen the Knin video many times, where General Gotovina demanded proper conduct by subordinates. Once again, the prosecution contradicts itself on this video. First, it claims, in paragraph 166, towards the bottom, as Chermak observed, Gotovina was not upset about the crimes and what the military had done. He was upset because the town was dirty and there were no state signs anywhere. But when they had to write a section on General Chermak, at paragraph 358, apparently the person who wrote the Chermak portion of the brief didn't coordinate the portion with the Gotovina portion of the brief. So we get this admission. Chermak attended Gotovina's briefing in Knin Fortress on 6 August 1995, from where villages around Knin were plainly seen burning, and heard Gotovina berate HV commanders for the looting and misdeeds of HV soldiers. Well, which one is it? Was he berating HV's commanders, for the looting and misdeeds of HV soldiers, as is plainly evident on the video? Or did he not care about that and just was concerned that the town was dirty? Your Honors, no reasonable person could look at that video and say that General Gotovina did not have a genuine intent to prevent and punish crime. On the 10th of August, General Gotovina issued D-204. You can see this on sanction, please. On its face, in the subject line, it says, "Order on compliance with military disciplinary measures." In point 1, actually in the introduction, it says it's being issued in order to prevent theft of property, undisciplined conduct, and to save human lives. Contrary to the prosecution's claim that General Gotovina issued this order pursuant to an order from General Chervenko, you will see that nothing in the introduction indicates as such. And you've seen many orders where the court can confirm the standard procedure was to refer to a superior order if, in fact, someone was acting pursuant to it. In point 1, General Gotovina prohibits arbitrary movement of HV members in the liberated areas without the knowledge of superior commanders. We go to paragraph 2. He says, "Take all necessary measures and fully engage in the implementation of the military disciplinary conduct and the maintenance of order in the area of responsibility, and prevent arson and all other illegal acts. Take resolute measures against anybody who conducts himself in an undisciplined manner." You've seen P918, which we saw earlier this morning. It specifically not only says what the state policy is, what the policy of President Tudjman and Minister Shushak is, but if we scroll to the bottom of the page, please. In bold, in cooperation with the Information and Security Service, that would be the SIS, and the military police, take repressive measures and launch disciplinary proceedings against those who do not abide by the instructions. Despite this, the prosecution in paragraph 221 of its brief says, quote,